Allen Lund Company, 47 years young and a proud sponsor, wishes OOIDA all the best as you celebrate 50 years.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Reddick.
It's the 158th anniversary of Juneteenth, and this is Landline Now. Tracking fuel tax state to state can be a confusing, complicated matter, but it's something that you have to have done right. I'll discuss that and updating the MCS 150 with Tom Crowley and Joe Biggs of OOIDA's Business Services Department. It can take a lot of work to get your own authority, and that includes insurance coverage. Today, we look at some tips for what you should look for when it comes to coverage and some questions to ask about your policy. And finally, OOIDA has many tools it uses to influence what happens in Washington, D.C. on behalf of truckers, and one of those is its PAC. As part of our ongoing coverage of the association's 50th anniversary, I'll discuss the PAC with OOIDA Chief of Staff Angel Burnell and the association's Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. But first, today's headlines. AB 5 is being blamed for several dozen owner-operators losing their jobs in California. The U.S. Secretary of Transportation explains the difficulties truckers might face in the aftermath of a bridge collapse in Philadelphia. And we'll tell you who won Best in Show at this year's Super Rigs competition. And now, the news with Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. Our top story today. Several dozen owner-operators in Los Angeles are blaming the state's AB 5 law for losing their jobs. The nearly 100 truckers did work for the As-Needed Haul Truck program, which dates back 130 years. California's Assembly Bill 5 codifies the ABC test, which makes it more difficult for a worker to be considered as an independent contractor. In May, the owner-operators working for the program got letters from the city stating that their contracts were being ended because a new ABC test applies to public entities such as Los Angeles. And while a legal battle against AB 5 continues to play out in the courts, with the California Trucking Association and OOIDA calling for a preliminary injunction, the law is already snaring truckers. In a conversation with Landline Now, U.S. Representative Kevin Kiley of California, an opponent of AB 5, said he's troubled by the recent events.
We saw from the get-go that you had hundreds of professions that have been negatively impacted by AB 5. The litigation involving truckers was ongoing for several years, but when that kind of reached a negative resolution last year, there was this fear that you're going to have many truckers taken off the road because it completely upends the independent owner-operator model. And so, now that we see some indication that that's beginning to happen, it is cause for tremendous concern.
Representative Kiley's concerns about an AB 5 model on a national scale are based in part by Julie Su's nomination to lead the Labor Department. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration is looking for several dozen drivers to help with an autonomous trucking study. The agency recently posted a notice on the Federal Register titled New Information Collection, Safety Impacts of Human Automated Driving System Team Driving Applications. In simpler terms, participants will use driving simulators in a study of team drivers in Level 4 autonomous trucks, which are capable of all driving functions and do not require a human driver. FMCSA is looking into the safety implications of team driving in Level 4 autonomous trucks and potential relief from hours of service regulations. About 80 commercial vehicle drivers are expected to participate in the study. Comments are due by August 7th. New details about the I-95 bridge collapse in Philadelphia. Cleanup has begun following that deadly crash, explosion, and collapse. Reconstruction will follow, and until that section of interstate is back open, expect delays. Officials say that could last for months. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, while touring the site of the incident, pledged full support during the reconstruction process. During a news conference, the secretary said 160,000 vehicles go over that section of I-95 every day, 8% of which are commercial trucks.
Well, look, what it means is that the trucks will have to take a longer and more costly route to get to where they're going. Now, I know America's truck drivers, they are creative, they find ways to adapt, they are resilient, and of course they're not doing that on their own. Again, there's going to be a lot of work, analysis, and support going into making sure that we make the most of alternative routes. We're even making contact with Google and Waze to try to optimize any kind of software information that is reaching drivers, whether it's commuters, travelers, or truckers. So they're going to do the best they can given this situation. But obviously, it is not just an inconvenience, it is a cost.
Detours are posted, and anyone traveling through the area is advised to plan ahead as lengthy delays are already being seen. The Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association is putting its support behind a proposed expansion of FMCSA's Crash Preventability Determination Program. FMCSA has been seeking feedback about expanding the program. Some possible changes include modifying existing crash types to broaden eligibility and removing the distinction between direct and indirect strikes. The program, which FMCSA has been operating now for 3 years, currently reviews 16 specific collision types and modifies information in the agency's safety measurement system to distinguish not preventable collisions from preventable ones. FMCSA's proposal would add 4 crash types to that program. OOIDA says adding crash types that can be deemed not preventable would help motor carriers. Comments for this stage of the proposal are now closed. FMCSA will now review them to determine the next step. Truckers Final Mile is asking for help so they can help several families in need. The organization uses donation money to reunite truck drivers with their families in the wake of a death, illness, or injury. In a Facebook post, Truckers Final Mile said they're working to get 3 truck drivers who passed away recently on the job home. Doing that will cost thousands of dollars each, and the charity organization asks that those who can donate do so. Since the group was founded in 2014, they've helped get more than 500 families through the worst day of their lives. For more information, check out truckersfinalmile.org. OOIDA board member Bob Essler was honored recently for his career in trucking. It happened at the American Truck Historical Society Convention and Truck Show in Reno, Nevada. Essler was one of several people given the Golden Achievement Award, which ATHS bestows upon people with 50 consecutive years in the industry. After watching a video laying out his career achievements, he told Landline he's humbled by the honor.
Well, I was asked a question, what has trucking done for you, a while back, and I thought about it for a second, and I said, it has allowed me to do things that this old Missouri boy thought he would never be able to do. It has allowed me to go places, greet people, meet people, do things, be in the White House, be in the halls of Congress, meet local government officials, meet new friends everywhere. It's just allowed me a world that I've never been able to do.
Essler was nominated for the award by OOIDA Executive Vice President Louis Pugh.
I love Bob to death. Bob's one of the first people I met when I come to OOIDA as a board member many, many moons ago. And he was head of the nomination committee, still is. And a long history with OOIDA, long history of trucking. And kind of our orientation, Bob was the guy that led that and stuff. I guess kind of broke us in. But he's got great stories and great things and great pictures. And he's just done a lot in his time. And there's nobody more deserving.
Golden Achievement Award winners also earn a spot on the ATHS Wall of Fame. And finally, congratulations to Truett and Crystal Novosad. The couple won the Best of Show award at the 41st Annual Sherrotella Super Rigs competition last weekend in Gillette, Wyoming, meaning $10,000 in prize money and a spot in the 2024 Super Rigs calendar. Their 2007 Peterbilt 379 EXHD also won the Steve Sturgis Best Theme Award for its Doc Holiday theme. It was one of many working trucks turning heads at the 3-day show. In all, about $25,000 in cash and prizes was handed out. That's Landline Now News for today. I'm Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Scott. Next, I'll talk IFTA with Tom Crowley and Joe Biggs of OOIDA's Business Services Department. We'll be back in a moment. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Firestone tires are for more of everything. More miles for every tire dollar, and more confidence in your fleet. At Firestone, we help fleets save with dependable value. Find your local Firestone dealer today at firestonetire.com/dealer.
Every make, every model, in every corner of the country. Technical smarts and quality parts. That's how we roll. Bring your rig into TA Truck Service.
Landline Now. Welcome back. Truckers call OOIDA all the time with questions about various issues and problems they encounter out on the road, and many of those calls are answered by the folks at OOIDA's Business Services Department. Here to go over some recent questions and to provide some answers are Tom Crowley and Joe Biggs of OOIDA's Business Services Department. Guys, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having us on.
Always good to be here, Mark.
Let's start with IFTA. The International Fuel Tax Agreement. I'm wondering if you guys can explain for folks that aren't familiar, because we've got people all the time that are getting to the point where they have to deal with IFTA, kind of what it is and how it works.
Yeah, Mark. Well, IFTA is the International Fuel Tax Agreement, or IFTA. It's an agreement between the 48 states, lower 48, and 10 provinces in Canada, and it allows motor carriers to report and pay their fuel taxes to their base state, where, once upon a time everybody had bingo cards and they had to, do that number. Well, they could pay all their fuel taxes to their base state, and then their base state will distribute those to the relevant states or the states that you drive in. Because IFTA is basically track your miles for each state you drive in and the gallons that you purchase there, and based on your miles per gallon, how much you burn in each state. And that's how your IFTA tax gets paid to each state. So you got to keep track of those records. And then there's a little bit more that goes into it, but that's the basis of it.
Let's go a little bit deeper into it.
For IFTA, it's any vehicle that has at least 2 axles exceeding 26,000 pounds, any 3-axle vehicle regardless of weight. So if you got a tractor that's a tandem tractor, it's tandem axle, drive axles, that's definitely going to fall under IFTA. Any vehicle used in combination that exceeds 26,000 pounds. So a lot of these hot shotters, that are running their F350 or F450 with a trailer, their GVWR is 26,001 or more, they're subject to IFTA. And then of course, then after that, you have to have the IFTA license. So you got to get with IFTA and get a license. You got to keep the records of all fuel purchased, detailed distance records that show taxable and non-taxable use of fuel. Because if you got a reefer, that's non-taxable fuel. You don't have to pay highway tax on that. But anything with rubber on the ground, putting power to the ground, you've got to pay taxes on it.
What does IFTA use to track mileage? Because I know you've talked before that they use a particular system to track their mileage, and it's one of those things where it may be advisable for the truckers to use that system as well. But what is it that they use?
Well, they use they use the
ProMiles?
ProMiles, thank you. I believe that is the one that what they use, but it comes more than that. Depending on. A lot of people use their ELDs to track their IFTA miles, and between the ELD and what IFTA requires and what the FMCSA requires from your ELD from your tracking is a little different. I'll let Joe talk a little bit about that.
Right. So if you're going to use your ELD, they have different guidelines, honestly, to get to the point. Whereas the DOT does not require location tracking of each GPS, calculated distance between GPS and other system readings, routes traveled by unit. The ELD, to be compliant for IFTA, does require those things. And it gets way more specific as far as location readings. DOT requires 60 minutes. IFTA can require every 15 minutes or less for it to be compliant for tracking. And if you don't have one that's compliant that follows the guidelines that they have set out, which they don't tell you which ones do, then they will bump you back down to 4 miles a gallon and make you redo everything. And that's, when you get audited, that's a big deal. So the ELDs, you got to be very thorough in your investigation with them to make sure that they're actually compliant.
Yeah, because what I recall, when ELDs were first required, they all said, hey, we'll do your IFTA, we'll track your IFTA. And then we had people going for audits using their ELD records, but their ELD did not ping every 15 minutes. And when it's on personal conveyance, it even gets looser with the tracking of the location. So, for IFTA, all miles must be recorded and tracked. And the ELD, so you need to make sure your ELD manufacturer is IFTA compliant, that it pings every 15 minutes, that it keeps better track of you. For a lot of years, when I was out trucking, I wrote down my miles on a on a notepad every time I crossed the state line, had to write down the highways that I went on. Of course, kept track of my fuel purchases in every state. And that's what I use for IFTA. Now, IFTA still likes to see trip reports. A lot of people don't do trip reports. They want everything digital. Well, digital trip reports, IFTA still likes to see that stuff. So, the more documentation that you have and you can prove yourself with, the better you are. Because IFTA audits are not pleasant.
What sort of things do you run into with an IFTA audit that you need to have handy? I mean, let's walk people through that a little bit. You say that they're not easy and not pleasant, but what is it about them that makes them unpleasant, I guess?
Well, some truckers do not keep the best of records. And, when you go in for an IFTA audit, the first thing they do is, and number one, they've got to audit about 3% of the people that are in their IFTA program for each base jurisdiction. Each state has to do an audit of about 3%. So that doesn't sound like a lot, but if you're out trucking for a few years, you'll probably get that call. So you've got to keep the track of the miles that you run, and you've got to be able to prove them, because when IFTA does their audit, they disprove everything and you have to reprove it. And if you don't have your documentation, if you don't have your trip reports, your fuel receipts, your miles for each state, that's where Joe mentioned the 4 miles per gallon. They will drop you to 4 miles per gallon and charge you the difference. Now, if you're typically getting 6 or 7, some trucks even get 8 miles per gallon out there nowadays, and you get dropped to 4 miles per gallon, you're going to owe a significant IFTA tax. And it's just cut and dry. People call up and say, hey, I need a lawyer for my IFTA audit. There's really not such thing, because it's cut and dry. You either have the receipts and can prove your numbers, or you don't. And if you don't, bad things are going to happen. And IFTA, when they throw out their fines, if you don't report a quarter or are late reporting, it's a $50 fine or 10% of the tax due in excess. But if they go through your records and they feel that you have been deceptive, or that you have raised your miles per gallon to pay less IFTA tax or whatever, that's when it can really get ugly. So, be honest with it. And I got to say, a lot of folks today, they're looking for somebody to do everything for them, a service for this, a service for that service. There's not a lot of profit in trucking. You really can't pay somebody to do all the stuff that you should be doing yourself. And I tell people, IFTA is really not a problem. You already have to track the numbers, the gallons, all this stuff. So what? You can call somebody up and give them those numbers over the phone, and they can file your IFTA and charge you for it. Or you can go to your IFTA website where you have your account, and you can enter those numbers yourself. It doesn't cost you anything to enter them. And then if you buy your fuel where you run your miles, you'll come out pretty even on IFTA. If you're buying your fuel in a very cheap state and then running your miles out in California or someplace where it's really expensive state as far as IFTA tax, you're gonna pay a pretty good chunk every quarter. So, buy your fuel where you run your miles.
Another good point to that is a lot of guys here at DOT requires record retention for 6 months. IFTA can go back 4 years. So you got to make sure you keep all that documentation. I mean, I know it's kind of hard and a pain when you have a bunch of paperwork, but you got to keep it, because if they find some quarters wrong, they're going to go back the full 4 years and audit you for everything.
Yeah, and to Joe's point there, logbooks, DOT requires you to keep them 6 months. And a lot of people don't keep them longer than that. But if you're using your logs to justify your IFTA, 4 years. Of course, if you're using your logs for per diem purposes to justify per diem, you got 7 years for IRS. So hang on to that stuff. I think if I went back and looked in my storage room there at the house, I bet I got some logbooks from the 90s back there. So
better to keep them longer and not need them than to not keep them and then need them.
Yeah, because if you don't have them and you can't prove everything that you've put down on paper, it's. And then there are some things that can flag an audit. If you have a late return, well, that makes you stand out from the crowd. If you have to amend a return, maybe you got something wrong on there, you go back and amend it. That can make you stand out. Definitely fluctuating miles per gallon and fuel purchase or fuel consumption. If that fluctuates a lot, that can stand out. If you get large refunds, and then of course if you close your account, and that's one thing on closing accounts. Right now, this time of year with trucking, is the rates where they're at, in the crapper and all. there are people shutting down their trucking company. And if you're shutting down, make sure you close out your IFTA account, because at some point you may want to fire back up, and you don't want to have issues with IFTA, and they will penalize you. And so make sure that you follow through and close out that IFTA account too.
Okay. Well, guys, let's move on to another topic in the time we have left here, which is the MCS 150 and updating that document. First of all, what is the MCS 150?
The MCS 150 is the carrier registration information. It can be found on the Safer website under the company snapshot. It basically covers your mailing address, your physical address, your company name, DOT number, MC number, and then lastly, the number of power units and the miles you drove for the previous year.
And we get a lot of folks that are calling us up, and their MCS 150 has not been updated. Well, if you don't, it's a biannual update. And if you miss your biannual update, then they will basically inactivate or deactivate your authority until you go and you can go and update it and be reactivated. But you don't want to be rolling down the road, get pulled into a scale house, and that's when you find out you've been deactivated. We talk to those people. So it's a biannual update. You can update it more often than that. You can update it yourself for free. There are many services out there. I know people, when they get their authority, they get just bombarded with all kinds of sales calls and, all these people wanting to get in your pocket. They'll update your MCS 150 for $199. Boy, no problem. That money's better served in your own pocket. You can do it for free. You can call us here at OOIDA. I think they do it for $40.
Yeah, $40 now.
I think we can do it but you can do it for free if you've got your PIN number and your login information. And that's something that people need to pay attention to and be updating that. Keep that accurate. You'll get stuff that says your VMT is outdated. That's vehicle miles traveled. That's something you can update yourself and stop those nuisance emails and sales calls from coming over that stuff. Because there are companies out there, third-party providers that mine the FMCSA's information all the time, and they're looking for somebody with a VMT outdated because they figure, well, two things. That's a new carrier, and they probably don't know that they can do this themselves, so let's call them up and get them to pay us to do something they can do themselves. So there's a lot of sales that goes in with that stuff. I call them, we'll just leave it at sales sharks.
And it's important to note that your DOT number, when you go to update it, the last two digits of your numbers determines the month, and then the second to last is if it's an odd year, even year. You have to do it in the month specified. So it goes from 1 to 0, which is January to October. So if yours is a 6, that's June. You have to do it in the month of June, because if you do it beforehand, you're going to have to redo it again after.
Yeah, and like we were saying, you can do it more often, but you must also do it during that month and the odd or even year that according to your DOT number. Because if you don't do it then, that's when you will get deactivated.
Okay. Well, guys, thank you very much for all the information. We certainly appreciate it.
Thanks for having us on.
Absolutely, Martin.
I've been talking with Tom Crowley and Joe Biggs of OOIDA's Business Services Department. And folks, if you have questions about these issues or other matters involving compliance, permits and licensing, or any of that type of matter, call Business Services. The phone number is 816-229-5791. We'll be back in a moment. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
You trust Prepass for more bypasses? Now let Prepass help with tolls. Prepass toll service means lower cost, one invoice for all tolls, and fewer violations. Created by truckers for truckers. Call 877-878-5970 or go to prepass.com.
Attention all truckers, Dean Michael, the tax doctor here. I want to talk to you about those dreaded tax problems. I know you want to keep on trucking and not even think about them, but let's face it, they're not going away all on their own. You need professional help. I've been helping truckers put their tax problems in the rearview mirror for years. I can help you too. Call me now for a free consultation at 888-557-4020 or go to mytaxhelpmd.com. It's like I always say, keep your eyes on the road, I'll keep mine on the IRS. 888-557-4020.
Landline Now. Welcome back. Like tires, fuel, and an engine, insurance is one of those things you just have to have for your truck. But not all insurance is created equal. Ashley Blackford is here with the experts from OOIDA's Truck Insurance Department to answer some questions.
Thanks, Mark, and hello to Trina Skywalker and Trista Roby with OOIDA's Insurance Department. How are you doing today, ladies?
Smashing.
Doing great. Wonderful. Today we are talking about shopping for insurance after you've gotten your new authority. We've discussed before what you should look for in the process of shopping for insurance, but let's focus on some specifics when it comes to getting your own authority and insurance for that type of operation. My first question is, can it be difficult to get insurance if you've just gotten your own authority?
The short of that is yes, it can be difficult, regardless of how many years experience you have driving and in the industry. A lot of insurance companies are looking for how many years experience you've had with that authority in a business that's already built up.
We've actually gone to a seminar where it was a lot of various insurance agents. And it was, one of those seminars, continuing education. And so there was a lot of information discussed. But one of the things that we found out is there's a lot of companies that won't even write coverage if you have new authority, which was kind of surprising to us because, like Trista said, your driving experience is a big part of all of that. And you have driving experience whether you're leased on or have your own authority.
And especially if it's good experience and a good history.
Right. Yeah, it was just surprising to see that so many companies just flat out wouldn't do it. I don't think either one of us realized that prior to.
That was definitely a big takeaway from that meeting.
What questions can someone expect to be asked if they've gotten their own authority and they're calling to get coverage?
Well, it's going to vary, depending on the company you're calling. They're all different. Some of the biggest stuff that you're going to get with any insurance company, I think, is going to be experience, employment history.
Equipment information.
What are you hauling?
Yeah. The thing is, and I mean, this is actually going to get drawn out now, so thanks for asking. But really, again, depending on who you're calling and depending on whether or not they're doing their underwriting up front or afterwards, sometimes with some of the smaller agencies and that sort of thing, there's just a few small questions they'll submit. They may get more questions back, or they may go ahead and get a rate, and then the insurance company, once it's bound, will come back with additional questions. And then, you've got your insurance companies that want to get all the information up front and give you more of a firm rate up front.
Yeah, we have had customer complaints because of the length of time, it takes to go through the quote process and obtain that information. And we just try to tell them, if you're getting a rate really quick, then there's a good chance that rate's going to change. There is a chance that the rate could change with any insurance company. There's an underwriting period specific to each state, that the company has kind of a window of time to say, oh, we just found out about this huge incident, we're going to have to cancel the policy. A lot of times it's just a rate change, but it's kind of a red flag when it's a really quick quote because they just haven't delved into enough information
in the background. And also, the thing that you have to think of is that insurance company is putting $1 million on the line 100% of the time. It's not like some of the secondary coverages that we've talked about, like bobtail, where they're only on the hook 5% or less of the time with primary liability, which is the coverage that you need for your own authority. And that's what activates your MC number. With that coverage, the insurance company is on the hook for $1 million 100% of the time. And quite honestly, if they're not underwriting that $1 million, Trina's right, red flag.
Right. Well, I mean, we kind of compare it to a gamble or a bet. More of a gamble than a bet. But I mean, for the underwriters, it is a gamble. They do have to assess the risk and see what kind of risk factors there are. If they see that there's a few speeding tickets, it's not always just about accidents and claims and things of that nature. Even if they see that, you're ticketed frequently or stuff like that, it's all part of them deciding whether or not they want to take the bet.
And it's all part of your history, really.
Right.
Why is it so important to be upfront about everything?
Well, the big thing about that is then the underwriters have all the information they need to give you a more precise rate. A lot of times with certain companies, and I mean, I can really speak for us, but when we insure, when we get all that information up front, we're depending on what's being told to us. So then when we actually go back and say we verify work history or receive loss runs, and there's information there that we didn't know about, and again, maybe speaking for other companies too, but there's information there that we don't know about, then that's when you're going to see rates increase.
And a lot of times, folks don't think that certain things count. So we'll find ourselves in a position where the underwriters find out about some sort of a claim or accident that happened, and this is after we've taken the down payment, started the policy, given what we believe is a firm rate. Then we find out about something else. And a lot of times they're like, it was private property, or I didn't turn it into the insurance company. I paid out of pocket, which is understandable. I understand, those situations, but it still is another accident that they didn't know about. It increases the risk. Anything that they find out after the fact increases the risk in their eyes. So whether it's a moving violation or a fender bender, even if it's one that's not at fault.
Or not reportable.
Right. It's still going to increase the risk.
Mm-hmm. Do you find people kind of hope like, well, they'll probably not find out about that, so I don't really want to mention it? You will find out.
Yes.
That's actually a pretty common one. And I think especially whenever they're giving work history, because typically you don't run into companies that are going to still do all of the legwork of calling those companies. But some insurance companies do still. And I remember actually Trina had a funny story about that.
Yeah, I had to call a customer and say, hey, the rate's increasing. We verified your employment, and there was whatever it was. It's been years ago. Something was found out, some accident. And, a lot of people are kind of frustrated by it. And he was like, man, no insurance company's ever found out about that before. So he was just shocked that we did. So it was a little comical just because you're used to hearing frustration in those calls. But he was just like, wow. Shoot.
And I mean, I think a lot of times that is the hope, is the insurance company won't find out about it. But I do think there are plenty of instances where people have just forgotten because it is so minor. It wasn't turned in. It wasn't reportable. It did happen on private property.
Or a personal vehicle. We have a lot of folks who don't think that something in a personal vehicle counts
but
towards commercial insurance. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it all is a testament to how you drive, regardless of what kind of vehicle you're in.
Now, if you call for coverage and your policy is canceled, can you be out money?
Well, if you cancel your insurance shortly after getting your authority, and it does happen.
Some companies short rate versus prorate. So, there are percentages that you have to keep your policy for so many days, or a certain percentage is kept out. What you'd really want to look for in those cases would be a prorated company, because they're only rating you for the days that you use.
Yeah, and we've heard stories in the past. I can't say it's happening now, but some insurance companies were kind of shysters.
Yeah.
And they would write a risk knowing that it probably wouldn't make it through the underwriters. Maybe it was brand new authority. And, they would know that that's not acceptable, but they would go ahead and push it through, take the down payment, and it would be more of a short rate company like Trista was talking about. And so they'd put 20% down and lose it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, get none of their deposit back, or, none of their even premiums, however, and knowing that that's going to be canceled from the get-go, knowing that it didn't meet the underwriting guidelines from the very get-go.
So what should someone ask to, make sure that if something does happen in the underwriting process that, do they get that deposit back? Or
I think that's really, one of the biggest things is what you just said. Is this deposit refundable? Am I going to get this back? Is this a prorated policy or a short-rated policy? And I mean, you don't have to be that technical with your terms, but basically, if you guys decide to cancel me tomorrow because your underwriters don't like something that they see on this application, is that deposit refundable?
Well, and you might just ask them kind of generically, too, like, what's your cancellation process? And you want to know, obviously there's different things you're looking for. The deposit's a huge one. But you also want to know, like, do they have to give some sort of a notice? Because we run into that a lot. When someone calls to cancel their coverage with us, there's filings that we have to file with FMCSA, and we're obligated to stay on those for 35 days after cancellation's requested, or whether or not it's requested. Even if we choose to cancel the policy, we have to give a 35-day notice. And some insurance companies will cancel it same day, like air quotes, in-house, same day. But a lot of companies won't, because they're still on the hook. If we cancel it in-house same day and then you have an accident 10 days later, our filing is still out there on FMCSA and we're still liable for the claim. So that's kind of a big deal too, because a lot of folks don't realize that the insurance company is obligated to that kind of notice.
So in some cases, that deposit is being used for those 35 additional days of coverage. You might have a smaller refund coming back than you think because a portion of that was used for the 35 days of additional coverage.
And there are some agents that might try to amend that cancellation after the 35 days. I can't say a lot of them do because it's extra premium they get to keep. But sometimes if you change your operation, lease to a motor carrier, it's worth asking them, if there's a chance that it could be amended, because some of them do.
Surprise, ask the questions.
Yeah.
The questions. And I think you've mentioned if you go to another insurance company, will they sometimes take over that 35 days?
They can. There's a thing called a hold harmless, and most companies accept those. And so basically when the new company takes over those filings, they'll write a hold harmless to your old insurance company saying, even though you're still on those filings for 35 days, we're holding you harmless during this time. So that's a pretty standard thing within our industry.
Yeah, that's about the only time the filing's going to get replaced, though, is if they just move insurance companies. If they change their operation, it's just going to have to write out the time.
Yeah. So if someone has gone through all of the trouble to get their own authority, what words of wisdom do you have for them when it comes to getting insurance coverage?
I would say biggest thing, ask the questions, be upfront, be totally transparent with your insurance company. Because you don't want a surprise down the line when you're already on the road or into your operation, finding out that you didn't meet their guidelines because maybe you weren't as upfront with them as you should have been.
Yeah, and especially if you've already done the work to figure out what your operating costs are. I mean, sometimes these rates jump by a lot, and it really changes everything about your operating cost.
All right. Wonderful. Well, ladies, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Our thanks to Trina Skywalker and Trista Roby of OOIDA's Truck Insurance Department. If you have any questions about insurance, you can call 816-229-5791. For Landline Now, I'm Ashley Blackford. We'll be back after this.
Today's rising costs affect everyone. Replace your harmonic damper with a genuine Vibertech TVD viscous damper to prevent costly repairs and downtime. Keep your money in your pocket and your truck on the road with Vibertech TVD. Recommended replacement at 500,000 miles or 15,000 hours.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com, because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount. Landline Now. Welcome back. It's time for another of our 50 on 50. 50 significant events from OOIDA's history in celebration of the association's 50th anniversary.
If you've been an observer of politics at all, you've likely heard the term PAC, or PAC, which stands for Political Action Committee. And like many groups that operate in Washington, D.C., OOIDA has a PAC. So what is it and how does it operate? What does it do? Here to explain are OOIDA Chief of Staff Angel Burnell and the association's Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. Angel, Jay, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Good to be with you.
So real quick on kind of a broad thing, what is a PAC and how do they work?
So a PAC is a political action committee, and the goal of a PAC is to provide donations to elect or re-elect political candidates. The OOIDA PAC's goal or mission is to educate lawmakers on issues that are important to small business truckers.
So how did the PAC come about?
The PAC was founded in 1989. We had a law firm in D.C. that put together the PAC and filed all the paperwork. We have since taken over all administration of the OOIDA PAC in-house. I'm actually the PAC treasurer. OOIDA has a membership PAC, and what a membership PAC is a way for our PAC to operate where administrative costs don't come out of the PAC. So 100% of any donations or monies received go to elect or re-elect federal candidates that are working for OOIDA or that support our issues. The benefits, again, our administrative costs don't come out of the PAC, but there is a negative too. A membership PAC can only collect donations from our members. So it does limit our abilities to take donations. It can't be from any trucker. It can't be from just the public. We have to only take PAC donations from the members of our organization.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how the PAC funds are used. And obviously, as you said, Angel, it's to elect or re-elect candidates that support truckers, support OOIDA's various issues. But it's a little bit deeper than that. Can you kind of explain?
Yeah, the primary use of the PAC funds is to continually educate lawmakers on OOIDA positions and different trucking issues. And it's also a way to build relationships with the various elected officials and other candidates. And, the government affairs team and the D.C. office is conducting hundreds of meetings throughout the year with various congressional offices. The majority of those are primarily with congressional staff. The actual elected officials are running all throughout Washington, taking votes, doing all sorts of meetings. A lot of the times we are fortunate to have members participate in the meetings, but the PAC funds give us another opportunity to meet directly with a congressman, congresswoman, a senator, and have a extended, detailed conversation on specific policies. And right now, a lot of that is lining up behind improving truck parking, improving hours of service, fighting back against speed limiters. So really having a chance to talk about a lot of the nuanced and detailed issues that certainly a lot of officials in Washington do not have a great understanding of, but through the PAC and through these meetings, they certainly come out with a much better appreciation of the trucking industry.
Generally speaking, what lawmakers does the PAC focus its donations on?
So we have very thorough conversations about who to target with our PAC dollars. And primarily, we are focusing on officials on transportation and trucking committees of jurisdiction, chairmen of transportation subcommittees and highway safety subcommittees. Then we're looking at certain areas and constituents and states where a lot of our members have an interest. Congressional districts that have a trucking interest and have thousands of OOIDA members in that district. So looking at folks who are going to have influence on key congressional committees in Washington.
One of the things that is kind of interesting about this is the fact, Angel, that this is a bipartisan PAC. And can you explain why that's important?
Absolutely. The OOIDA PAC is bipartisan. That means that we reach out to candidates on both sides of the aisle. The letter behind their name doesn't matter to us. What matters to us is the position that they take with regard to OOIDA issues. We want to support those candidates that support truckers, that support trucking, that have an interest in OOIDA issues, those things that are important to small business truckers.
And one of the other things that I did want to ask you about is how does this compare to other PACs? There's a lot of PACs out there, and OOIDA is one voice in the middle of all this cacophony. I'm wondering if you can kind of explain how it does compare to other PACs.
Yeah, I like to say that the OOIDA PAC is just big enough to be dangerous, and certainly, it really helps having 150,000 members who, a lot are just giving whatever they can to the PAC fund, and that helps, generate a pretty substantial chunk of money that we can, take a lot of time and pick out members to contact through that funds. And when you look at the OOIDA PAC compared to some of the other big players in the trucking industry, we are not the biggest by any stretch, but that allows us to be nimble, really build strong relationships with the members that we target through PAC funds. When you look at some of the other organizations, they are maxing out on pretty much every member in Washington, D.C. So they're kind of taken for granted, I think, a little bit, where if we're spending the money on a candidate, they know the value of that contribution, and really, I think, helps us be a little more selective in who we want to target, and really build those relationships with folks who are supporting small business truckers.
And really, to just follow up on what Jay talked about, because of the size of our PAC, it is much smaller than a lot of other industry PACs. We are very deliberate with how we spend our money, meaning we don't just send campaign contributions into somebody that's supporting OOIDA initiatives. We do that, but we send the money to attend an event so that we get face-to-face time with that lawmaker so that we can really educate that person. The event is not important. What is important is the time we get to spend with that lawmaker so that they know OOIDA and they know our issues.
So it's really about building relationships.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
I'm wondering if you could give us an example of an issue where the PAC was useful in terms of moving the issue forward for truckers.
Yeah, the Trucker Bathroom Access Act that has just been reintroduced this Congress is a great example of that. During the pandemic, we heard about Congressman Troy Nehls, who serves on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, talk about the importance of truckers. And kind of through our background with him being on the committee, we had reached out initially to his office, and using the PAC funds had a chance to really have some great conversations with the congressman personally, talk to him about the challenges and just really the unbelievable aspects that drivers who are picking up or waiting on their loads at a shipping or receiving facility sometimes can't use the bathroom at that facility while they're waiting around. And through those conversations, that kind of has led into actual legislation being introduced in the House of Representatives to help small business truckers who are out on the roads every day.
Okay. I want to thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us, Mark.
I've been talking with OOIDA Chief of Staff Angel Burnell and the Association's Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes.
That was another of our 50 on 50. 50 significant events from OOIDA's history in celebration of the Association's 50th anniversary. We'll bring you a new entry every week from now until the actual anniversary celebration.
Our program is produced by the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association, the national organization representing America's small business truckers. That's our show. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Penske owns and operates some of the best-maintained vehicles on the planet. Our used trucks come with a 5-year maintenance report and pre-sale inspection. So if you're in the market for a top-quality pre-owned truck, look no further. Search our inventory today at PenskeUsedTrucks.com.
I'm a dad.
A son.
A husband.
Wife.
I'm a writer.
Photographer.
I farm. I'm a veteran.
I love old cars. Fishing.
My kids.
Chrome. And I am a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us!
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.